So this meeting is being is recorded. Okay, welcome back to the third day of the discussion meeting. So today we have Swarnendu Banerjee from the Copernicus Institute of Sustainable Development, Utrecht University in Netherlands, to talk about spatial patterns and how to evade tipping points in spatial ecosystems. Over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and sorry for the delay. This was not working properly. Yeah, so thanks to the organizer for giving me the opportunity to present this work. So I'm currently a postdoc at Utrecht University, and what I'm going to talk about today is what I am trying to do there. So yeah, what the idea behind our work and what we think we would do in the coming months. Okay, so this is the outline of my talk. First, I'll talk about vegetation patterns, which were believed to be early warning signals of tipping points. You have got some idea of how vegetation patterns were thought to be early warning signal from the last talk of Corina Tarnita. And then we'll talk about how we are trying to revise this theory, like what are the new developments, what we think now about in this context. And then finally, what I'm trying to do there, yeah, what I'm trying to develop in Utrecht. So, yeah, so all the talks in this conference would be incomplete without this picture. So this is a picture of the tipping point. So as you increase pressure, there could be an abrupt transition from desired ecosystem state to an undesired state. And so this is an example could be from vegetated land transition to abrupt transition to desertification, and models do predict that this desertifications can happen by such a catastrophic shift. But if you go into the drylands, then what you really find is these beautiful patterns. Some of those you have already seen in a previous talk. So these are like all over the world. You can see these patterns from Australia and Niger and Israel and Zambia and all different kinds of very nice and beautiful patterns, gap patterns and stripe and labyrinths. And the question really is how these patterns are related to tipping point in ecosystems. So in order to understand that, first I'll take a couple of minutes to explain how this can be modeled. And I'll not go into the details, but this is a seminal work from Max Richtpark, who tried to model this pattern formation in drylands. And so this is the equation representing the vegetation, and then there's this soil water and there's the surface water, and there is a positive feedback between how the vegetation, and so the vegetation increases infiltration, and then the infiltration in the water, which in turn increases vegetation, and then there is this positive feedback which is said to be the cause of this pattern. So this scale dependent feedback, as they say, so it's in the literature they call it scale dependent feedback, which is basically the positive feedback in surrounding areas, like the short distance positive feedback, but long distance negative feedback. So as you move away from the vegetation patch, then water from the surrounding patch would diffuse to the patch with vegetation, because there there's a higher filtration and water is going within the soil. And then if water in the surrounding areas is less, then that leads to decrease in vegetation. So vegetation causes increase in vegetation locally, but then a negative feedback farther away, which is called scale dependent feedback. And this could lead to the type of patterns that I showed, Turing patterns they are called. And it was believed that, so this picture I think you have already seen in one of the earlier talks from Corina Tarnita, that it was believed. So this was back in 2004, where yeah, Max they actually had this theory that these patterns are early warning to tipping points. So first there would be some gaps in the vegetation, then there would be labyrinths, and then spots. And when you have spots, you know that the ecosystem is very close to tipping points. But this was like in 2004, and recently we had a yeah, Max changed his mind, and we had a paper where we tried to review the literature, and then we argued that maybe these patterns are not early warning to tipping, because there are new mathematical advancements which talk about this Busse balloon, which is basically the stability region of the patterns. So the Busse balloon is basically a region in the parameter wave number space. And then if there is a Turing bifurcation before the tipping point, which we call Turing before tipping, then there could be this small transition. So as you change the environmental condition, the patterns would remain stable until it reaches the boundary of this Busse balloon. And then there will be a small transition to a pattern of different wave number or different wavelength. And then as you again move, there will be a even smaller transition, and there will be so like a cascade of small tipping points, but not really an abrupt transition as we believed earlier. So the classical theory of tipping point may break down if in case there is a pattern in ecosystem. So that's what we are trying to argue. And so the formation of vegetation patterns actually may be a signal of resilience of the ecosystem instead. And just to demonstrate how the Busse balloon works, so when you have this, so this is the parameter, this is the wave number space, and when you have this these patterns, so this is a stable solution of pattern solution, and when you have this, as you change the parameter, this moves and then reaches the boundary and then drops to a different wave number. And you can see here how this the patches, so this is the parameter, this is the space, and you can see how the patches would collapse, and there would be less and less patches. So not from a direct transition from a vegetated state to or maybe a pattern state to a barren land, but basically gradual transition as we change the parameter. So that's the argument. And yeah, so what I've been talking about is basically this classical view where it was earlier thought that these patterns are early warning to tipping points. Now we have this new, not really new, the concept of Busse balloon comes from fluid dynamics, which was yeah, developed long back, but I think the application in ecology is kind of recent. And then we think that this Busse balloon can lead to this gradual transition of patterns. But what can also happen is when there is this coexistence state, when there is this bistable state, there could be this what we call as coexistence states. That means there could be local disturbances in the area which could lead to patterns, and then one of the states could invade the other. There could be instabilities, and like this region in the bistable state, there could be multiple types of patterns, and those patterns we also think can lead to gradual transition instead of catastrophic shift between alternative stable states. So, and what I'm working on right now is I'm trying to focus on this mechanism and trying to understand how these local disturbances can lead to this coexistence state, which in turn could lead to evasion of tipping. And so the system that I'm studying is basically a savanna ecosystem, which you can think of as a continuous stretch of grassland and with trees in between, and it is present all over the world, like not all over the world, but a large portion of the world. And why we think this is ideal, this is a good system for our study, like to prove our hypothesis, is that is because there are known sort of so it is believed that, for example, the forest savanna boundary is bistable. So one of the tipping elements is the forest savanna boundary. And then also there could be a bistability between this in the mesic ranges where there is intermediate rainfall. There could be bistability between savanna woodland, like so that there will be more trees and less grasses, with more grasses and less trees. Those bistabilities are also hypothesized in the literature. People believe that that could happen. And then also in the very arid region, there could be this bistability between uh, mm, vegetated and desert state. So there are all these kinds of bistabilities which are there in the literature. And then also, if you look into the savanna ecosystem, there are different kinds of patterns that you see. So these are all images from like either aerial photographs or taken from Google Earth. And for exact location, I don't have the exact location here, but it is there in the paper. So the different kinds of patterns are there, and different kinds of bistabilities we think are there in the savanna ecosystem. So we thought that maybe this is a good like an ideal system to study our hypothesis. And then I started to focus on this tropical for the forest savanna boundary, which is one of the important believed to be one of the important tipping elements in the Earth system. And then so just to elaborate on that, there are papers which have shown bistability between in tree cover with so this is mean annual precipitation, and for some annual precipitation you can see that there is this bimodality between in tree cover. And just to have an idea of where this bistability or bimodality is, so this is the region where this bimodality is actually. So just to demonstrate where exactly can we see this type of bimodality in the ecosystem in Africa, or like a savanna ecosystem. And if we look at one of those like one of these blue regions, like these bimodal regions, what we can see is this kind of patterns. So this side is completely forest, and this side somewhere here is these regions. So then you can see that there are these type of patterns, and we think that these patterns can be explained by, like we think this is what we think, that these patterns can be explained. Also, I should mention that it could be topography as well. Like this could be topography. This could be human like disturbances in the boundary. It could be many things, but we also think that it could be explained by front instability. So something like this. So this is the bacterial invasion, and then in a medium, and then you can see that so this is the bacterial population, and then the branches out as they invade, and the figure do look similar to the patterns that we see in the at the boundary. And then and this is one other simulation. So this is, I try to reproduce a paper from the group of Ehud Meron, where they talk about front instability in desert ecosystem. So you can see that as so if this is vegetated state, this is the barren land. As one invades the other, there could be this instability of the front, which could lead to such kind of patterns, like we call it fingering patterns. And we think that these kind of mechanisms could also be important at the boundary, apart from only topography and disturbances. So what the paper showed was so the simulation that I showed was from this paper. So what they showed was this as desert, you can see with time, as desert barren land invaded this vegetated state, there is this front instability, and the vegetated state actually propagates into the barren land. So they call it reverse desertification. So as desert invades, the vegetated state can also invade, and this could help in reversing biome transitions and ecological restorations. Because so if in reality you find this kind of things, then you can just plant something here maybe, and then this could have implications in ecological restorations. So our idea was whether we could do a similar thing at the savanna forest boundary. Like, can we come up with a model where we see like a this pattern formation at the savanna forest boundary, like and which we think could explain all the spatial heterogeneities, like some of the spatial heterogeneities at the boundary. And then I was really excited, but yeah, then I came up with this model. There is this model from Stever group, Carlos Stever group, where they have they have this model where they implicitly model implicit space model where they model tree cover, but we chose to model biomass here because we thought that it would be nice to compare this with the dryland ecosystem model and see how the two things, because of the model structure, how the two mechanisms would differ, change the pattern formation, and yeah. So we developed this model where these S and F are basically biomass of savanna and forest, and so this is the logistic growth. So this would be the negative effect of like the forest has this shading effect on the savannas. So under the shade, the savanna grasses, they cannot grow well. So you have this negative effect here. This would be the impact of fire on the forest. So the savanna, these grasses are basically they burn, and it can affect the forest, and then we have this negative effect here. These are just natural rates. So we try to come up with a very simple model, like the most simplistic as possible. And then we thought that we will analyze it, and we will try to see how, under which condition this kind of instabilities are seen. And so for that, of course, we needed a bistability because yeah, so it is believed that, as I told, that the savanna and forest, these are bistable at the boundary. So then we checked if this model is also bistable. So this is basically a competition model, as you can see. So it's a yeah, and you can always see bistability in this model. So there you can see a bistable. So there's bistability between savanna only and forest only state, and so with changing forestry growth rate, you can see that there is this region of bistability. And then also you can see with changing fire frequency, you have this bistable region between savanna only and forest only state. And but the thing is that if you extend this bistable model spatially, then what you see is basically just propagation of fronts like this. So when you keep this bistable model so like this, so if even when the model is bistable, if we just have a landscape with half of the forest and half savanna, then you can always see this one front propagating the other. So there's this transition between forest and savanna. Yeah, this is just a example of how things happen, and it would also happen the reverse way. But our aim, you remember, was to find if we have these fingering instabilities, the fronts would become unstable, and then we could show those patterns that that I earlier showed in the images, right? So then I'll not go into details, but we did analyze this model, and then we talked with mathematicians, like real mathematicians from geometric singular perturbation theory, and they had all this. So we came up with newer complexities and saturation terms, and yeah, so mathematically, sometimes mathematically motivated, like very odd terms. So I don't even know how to explain this, but we thought, let's see if if this kind of tweaking the model would actually give me such a pattern, and then we would see if yeah, then we would say, so this would actually represent some kind of facilitation at the boundary, which I'm not sure if there is ecological how much ecologically valid that is, but we did try lots of other modeling, and then did we find fingering patterns? So the answer is no. we were not able to find anything in that model. And then we thought maybe it is indeed topography, or maybe it's disturbance, or maybe the things that were like the patterns that we think can explain the dynamics actually does not. But like we are not sure. So what is required is actually like a systematic analysis of the spatial patterns at the boundary. And of course, we believe that like front dynamics have some role to play, because you cannot just see the boundary as a straight line in the ecosystem. So there are these patterns which we think front dynamics should have a role to play. But the thing is, why we did not see such pattern? So there is this recent paper from Paul Carter and group co-authors, who is also a collaborator. And so while they're working on this, they actually developed a sort of a general idea when these patterns can form and when not. And yeah, so they have all these systems where they try to find a general condition of when you can see this pattern. And this is basically a simulation which I from this model, which is again a dryland model, but a much simpler model. So the earlier model which I showed from Eudes Meron's group, which showed this kind of instability, was a very complex model. But here they argued that it doesn't need to be like so complex. Only simple dryland model can give us such patterns. But so the idea behind, so we are trying to understand how the ecologically we can interpret such conditions. And one of the things that we think is the importance of resource. So wherever we see these patterns, we have this. So this would be vegetation, and yeah, this would be vegetation, and this would be rainfall. And then this rainfall is taken up by the vegetation. And the condition that they have which I did not show here because it's very mathematically complicated, and we are trying to interpret that. And we think that the condition really means that you need a sort of resource limitation in the model to actually see such fingering patterns. And in our model, remember that we did not have such a resource limitation, because water is abundant at the forest savanna boundary, and we have this positive feedback due to fire and shading. And so that is where we up to and yeah, we are trying to understand these differences in models and trying to come up with yeah, the mechanism of pattern formation. And so this is what is next. So we are trying to compare the models at the dry and the humid end. We are trying to find can we say something about the ecological conditions? Can we have fingering instabilities in a 3-component model, where in a drier savannas where water is limited, can we have that? And this is one of the goals, to have a unified model of savanna where there would be this. We can come up with a model where there would be patterns, where we can reproduce the patterns all over the place and then investigate their resilience. And yeah, these are my collaborator. Max is my supervisor, and yeah, these are the other collaborators. I would like to acknowledge them and my funding. Yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for
Thank you. Because we're running short of time, just one or two quick questions. Partha.
Something called instability. Do you know that?
No, I'm not sure, but I do know that this type of instabilities are studied in fluid dynamics, and even the concept of Busse balloon comes from the person Busse is actually from fluid dynamics.
So what they do, they have a porous media and they have two different fluids, and then there can be this Huffman-Taylor instability, and that instability results this viscous fingering.
Okay.
A lot of works are there. You can take a look in that literature.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I had one comment, which is that one of my undergrads did their work. Nikunj, so he was able to explain some patterns on the boundary.
Yeah, the bend in the boundary, no?
Yeah. And that is proposed because of precipitation gradient. Yeah, so I don't know if it's applicable for the slightly finer scale you're looking at.
Yeah,
it's worth thinking about it. Yeah, but there it seemed to match empirically well with
And even
data
now,
as well.
I know that paper, like I read that paper, and even if you take this spatial gradient of this forest growth
Precipitation.
rate, which
Mhm,
that
mhm.
paper you have taken,
Yeah.
yeah, then actually like you can understand some other patterns which I did not show here, like this
Mhm.
spatial heterogeneity can give you some multi-stable coexistence states.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is a good yeah, we are trying to look at.
Okay. So thank you very much. Very interesting work. Wish you all the best with the future directions. Next speaker.